Hello everyone, welcome back to GGN. This is part 2 for this news report today for Monday, February 25th, 2013. My website is ggnonline.com and on YouTube my channels are ddarko2012 and ddarko2013. Okay, so I'm going to start off with this article here with Syria. Foreign powers send heavy weapons to moderate Syrian rebels, says a report. Outside powers have reportedly supplied heavy weapons to the moderate Free Syrian Army fighters, the Washington Post reports. Allegedly, the arms have been delivered to Syria to counterweight radical Islamists hijacking the rebel movement. Interesting. So it says here the weapons have been delivered to the Free Syrian Army groups in the Syrian province of Jara in the south of the country across the border with Jordan, but Jordan government denied any role. Oh yeah, here we go, okay. The idea was to get heavier stuff, intensify supply, and make sure it goes to the good guys, the official told the Washington Post. So this is pretty crazy. I'm going to talk about this here in the next couple of articles about, it's just going to make the situation worse. If you want to weaken al-Nusra, you do it not by withholding weapons, but by boosting the other groups, so bringing in more weapons. West pours arms into Syria's al-Qaeda mass slaughters civilians. West fueling deadly conflict that has allegedly killed 70,000 people. It says repeat a lie often enough and hopefully people will begin to believe it. This is what a concerted effort by Western media houses hopes to achieve as they claim the recent flow of heavy weapons from Western nations and their Arab-Israeli partners is boosting moderate rebels and tilting the balance of Syria's conflict against the Syrian government. It says in particular, it sets the tempo for a coordinated propaganda campaign claiming in the report, in Syria, a new influx of weapons to rebels tilts the battle against Assad. It says the Washington Post refuses to use the term al-Qaeda and instead labels the international Persian Gulf finance armed and harbor terror organization as radical Islamist. It says if you want to weaken al-Nusra, you do it. Yeah, see, there's a quote. It says al-Qaeda and moderates are the one of the same. So it says al-Nusra, of course, is al-Qaeda in Syria and is linked directly to the openly West-created backed moderate opposition. This Moaz Khatib that we talked about before, leader of the so-called National Coalition, demanded the U.S. take al-Nusra in particular off their list of sanctioned terrorist organizations. It says the decision to consider a party that is fighting the regime as a terrorist party needs to be reviewed. We might disagree with some of the parties and their ideas and their political ideology or ideological vision, but we affirm that all the guns of the rebels are aimed at overthrowing the tyrannical criminal regime. Finishing up with this article, and you can check it out, links should be posted. While the Washington Post tries to claim al-Qaeda is somehow a separate entity from the Syrian opposition, the West-owned opposition front openly defends and supports al-Qaeda's ongoing violence, which most recently manifested itself in a car bomb targeting scores of civilians, including school children. And I saw an article that said schools and buses and stuff like that are at the front lines in Syria, and I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? It's like the same media that's backing all of this invasion of terrorists, funding them and stuff like that. They're targeting schools and killing these civilians on purpose, blowing up bombs right outside schools. This has happened at least 2 or 3 times. So it's not, they make it seem like, oh, they're caught in the middle. No, they're being targeted. Syrian army continues battle against militants near Damascus. So just a quick little update as far as what's going on. It says here that on Sunday, a number of militants were killed during intense clashes with Syrian troops in the city of Douma, situated about 6 miles northeast of the capital. Several terrorist hideouts were raided by the Syrian forces during a mop-up operation in the town of Erbil. Dozens of gunmen were killed in the process. Then we have Syria ready to talk with armed opposition. Syrian's foreign minister says that the government is ready to hold talks with the armed opposition. Says we're ready for dialogue with anyone who's willing for it. Goes on, he says even those who carry arms, we are confident that reforms will come about not with the help of bloodshed, but through dialogue. U.S. tries to keep Syrian rebels from boycotting Rome conference. It goes on here and it says that despite claiming unity, the rebel Syrian National Coalition seems more divided than ever, to the extent that the high-profile Rome conference, aimed at convincing Western nations to supply them with more funding and arms, may not even happen. As well, it will happen, but most of the Syrian National Council may not be in attendance, with several groups threatening to boycott the meeting, both as a function of internal divisions and tensions with the international community. It says the U.S. is desperately trying to talk everyone into attending, warning this may be the only chance at convincing the West and short-term policy shifts towards Syria with open talks of stepping up direct armament of the rebels. And from today, the 25th, from Land Destroyer Report, dead French photographer was State Department funded, embedded with Al-Qaeda. So it goes on here and it says that these Western journalists and NGOs from an ever-increasing number of nations, it's revealed that a French photographer recently killed in Syria was embedded with terrorist militants in Idlib, northern Syria, and was working on behalf of the U.S. State Department or the department's National Endowment for Democracy, NED-funded Reporters Without Borders. The UK Daily revealed in their article, French photographer killed by flying shrapnel in Syria as rebels launch fresh offensive on police academy. It says here that the organization Reporters Without Borders is a notorious foul NGO that plays a pivotal role globally, undermining nations targeted by Western corporate financier interests, working in tandem with the U.S. State Department-backed proxies in Iran, China, Russia, Sudan, and everywhere else. Wall Street and London seek to plant their flag. And lastly, it says the French photographer found himself amongst these very militants in the midst of what we are being told are waves of rebel gains. Apparently these gains are being made at a high cost. Afghans order U.S. forces out of province, charging torture. The Afghan government Sunday ordered all U.S. special forces to leave a province after reports from local officials that the elite force is behind several cases of Afghan civilians being tortured or disappeared. It says here they allege that 9 people had disappeared after being seized by U.S. special forces in raids on their homes, the Guardian reported. They were also accused of the death of a university student whose tortured remains were found days after he went missing. Then we have Russia calls for international intervention in Mali. I was kind of surprised by this. Russia's foreign ministry said the international community must ramp up its efforts and stop the tide of violence from rising in Mali. It says it was agreed that a lack of control over the spread of weapons in the region after the Libya conflict, it's interesting when he calls it that, has created the basis for an escalation in tensions throughout the Sahel region. He may be referring to this, though. 93 fighters killed in northern Mali, says Chad military. At least 93 fighters have been killed in clashes with the Malian and Chadian soldiers backed by French troops, who I just noticed they have 4,000 in there right now. It says here, in the mountainous region of northern Mali. The warriors left thousands of Malians homeless. It says the U.S., Canada, Britain, Belgium, Germany, and Denmark have aided France in its war on the African country. Which is funny. I know most of you are aware of this, that the French president just received a Peace Prize. So, French invasion of Mali, increasing domestic terror threats. So the Mali war is increasing French citizens' vulnerability at home. So they're not just getting becoming homeless and having to be fragmented. It says here they may be couching as a war against terrorism, but the top judge in France's anti-terrorism court is warning that the invasion of Mali is actually having the opposite effect, increasing the risk of terrorist attacks in France. He warned that there's been an increase in the number of French passport holders with ties to northern Africa that have been leaving for Mali and its neighbors in recent months, and many will be back with training and militant ties. So we've seen this many times before. This is exactly what it does, which is these Western countries will say, well, we got to go in there and stop the terrorists, and really there's not as big a terrorist threat as there is after they go in there, right? So they go in there for they're going there for the resources, but they say they're going in there to fight Al-Qaeda, but really they're going there to take the resources, and then when they leave, or once they get there, they actually create a real big threat of Al-Qaeda. Obama alerts Congress he sent military personnel to Niger from February 22nd. Obama says about 100 U.S. military personnel have been deployed to the African nation of Niger. In a letter to Congress, Obama says the forces will provide support for intelligence collection, I wonder what that might be, intelligence sharing with French troops fighting militants in neighboring Mali. He said 40 U.S. troops arrived Wednesday with the consent of the government of Niger, bringing the total to 100. Says the forces are armed with weapons for the purpose of providing their own force protection and security. At least he wasn't lying about that. At least he didn't call it a peace mission. It says here a peacekeeping mission. U.S. troops arrive in Niger to set up drone base. Obama's announced Friday that 100 U.S. troops have been deployed to West African Niger. They said they're setting up a drone base to spy on Al-Qaeda fighters in Sahara. So again, all in the name of Al-Qaeda, right? No. This has nothing to do with this, right? Just like blaming Iran about space, for launching space weapons with Israel. in the end, it's going to be Russia, China, U.S. They could make up this game about fighting each other when it all comes down to it. They're all on board with this global system, so it's not going to be us versus them. It's going to be one system of control, and we're pretty close to it. And they use this Al Qaeda threat as as a way to legitimize what they're doing. So in Africa, I talked about this Zero Hedge article about how they want to establish more drone bases, and open up the intelligence network in Africa. And part of this Mali invasion, besides fragmenting people, besides taking the resources, is setting up intelligence and drone bases. So voila, there you go. Russia and China oppose military intervention in North Korea. So they're for intervention in Mali, but they're against intervention in North Korea. By the way, I did see that Red Dawn movie, and it was kind of creepy. I mean, pretty good propaganda about, in Iraq, we had to fight the bad guys, the terrorists, but now we're the bad guys. And as interesting as the movie may be, I mean, if there was like actual North Korean troops parachuting and then Russian Spetsnaz coming, backing them up once the insurgents start to really wreak havoc like they were in the movie, it just sucks because if they actually made these people leave, these occupying forces leave, what would they replace with it? They would replace the same government, right, that led to this, which is really, really sad. So it says here, China Foreign Minister says we are against the carrying out of nuclear tests in North Korea. But China and Russia both agreed that it was vitally important to not allow the situation to be used as a pretext for military intervention. I said before, it's kind of funny because, they could talk about how Pakistan, like twice, I think in a week, was firing off these missiles that were capable of carrying nuclear warheads. Not mentioned once in the mainstream media. Why? Well, because they're already an occupied country. That's the sad thing about Korea. If only they could be united, right? That's what they do. It's part of this this tactic is to just divide them in half, right? And then they got a nice little, the first female president, or whatever the hell they call it down in South Korea, right? To show equality. And North Korea, right? They just kind of pit them against each other. But a unified Korea, man, that would be unstoppable against the U.S., whatever they would do to them. And they know that. So U.S. officials secretly visited North Korea. So it says here, I already covered this before, U.S. officials have made 2 clandestine trips to North Korea in the past year in efforts to sway its new and young leader into softening his nation's stance towards Washington. So this ex-director of U.S. National Counter-Proliferation Center in the Office of Director of National Intelligence, wow, that's important. There are certain things I just won't talk about, and this is one subject I really feel it's not appropriate for me to comment on. Okay. Then we have Pyongyang honors nuclear scientists, workers. So North Korea has granted state medals and other honors to scientists. It says here some 11,592 scientists, technicians, workers, and other officials awarded state decorations involved in the country's recent nuclear test, which was carried out. Its third one says it involved a miniaturized device and was conducted in a perfect manner, they said. Then Japan, this X-band radar system eyed for Kyoto Prefecture, says Japan and the U.S. have discussed installing an early warning radar system in Kyoto Prefecture to counter North Korea's missile threat. It says here the installment was the first outside the United States. It was enacted as part of a realignment of U.S. forces in Japan. An ethnic war in Myanmar has China on edge. Says Chinese army units have been undergoing intense training near the border with Myanmar in anticipation of ethnic war there, spilling in southwest China. Okay, they're anticipating it spilling into China. So they're saying it's between this ethnic Kachin rebel army and the Burmese army. But I think it has something to do with this. 97 Rohingya Muslims die of hunger after 25 days stranded at sea. This is like every couple months you see a story of these poor bastards floating around at sea. 33 Muslim immigrants who were rescued off the coast of Sri Lanka last week said they were on a boat heading to Malaysia when Thailand Navy forces intercepted them and took the boat's engine. They were left floating at sea for 25 days without water and food. One survivor said the journey was dangerous, but we had to do that as we feared for our lives, no jobs, and big fighting in Myanmar. Remember this from October of last year, pro-democracy groups behind Myanmar refugee attacks. So supporters of Suu Kyi, leaders of the Saffron Revolution, leading ethnic cleansing of Myanmar refugees. 7 countries that are beefing up their militaries. Of course, you have China's number 1, Japan is number 2, India is number 3, been covering that. Iraq, you have Saudi Arabia, Algeria, and Russia. Even the UAE is buying U.S. Predator drones. This is GGN on Argo. Thank you.